Yeah, I need volume.
Oh,
Good morning. Welcome. You came back. That's always a great sign. We are on our second session for the 30th anniversary year. A reminder that the September lectures are always dedicated to Greg Kaufman, who was the director prior to my time here and continues to be an instructor. I think everyone, most everyone has met Greg. Today, we have the privilege of having Reverend Don Wisner here, who will be talking to us about baptism and other sacraments of belonging. I think that somebody did you all recommend that we should revisit baptism last year? Somebody said, you know, we should remind ourselves why we as Lutherans, we do this. And so that's one of the reasons. But Don was one of the handful of pastors who in the beginning conceived of this wonderful project and helped to bring it to fruition. And so we're thrilled to have him here. We honor Greg, also involved in that time. Don has been very active in this area of the church, this geographic area, served in many capacities. But I think, so I'm biased, right? But I think the lay school is one of the huge contributions he made, and that of being a teacher of the church. And so rather than tell you all about him, I'll let you experience firsthand his teaching. And so I turn it over to you, Don. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh. You should save your applause till I'm finished. You see. This is kind of like a reunion for me. It was 31. I'm getting a bad echo. Can you? Yeah. Okay. Better?
We're not getting it.
Oh, well, I am. Excuse me? I think I'm picking up from some. Is this better for you? Yeah. It was about 31 years ago, and I was with a good friend of mine named Jim Homme. Jim was pastor at First Lutheran Church in Eau Claire, and I had just left the faculty at Luther Seminary, and I came to University Lutheran in Eau Claire. And Jim and I got together one day, and we had independently read about a movement in Germany called the Academy Movement, in which it's very similar to what lay school. In fact, out of that, we came with the idea of establishing an academy in the Northwest Synod of Wisconsin. We didn't know what to call it. So we went to some people who had probably more imagination than we had. So we went to Greg Kaufman and we went to Dick Riesehoff, and we laid out this idea that the lay people of our synod, they deserved better adult education than we were able to provide independently in any one of our congregations. And so what we decided to do was to start a kind of an academy with people from all over our synod. We decided on some basic kind of rules back then. We decided, number one, that we would not be a vocational school, that we would be providing you with the best theological education we could provide. And we decided that the categories would be scripture, theology, liturgy, because I had a bias, and I wanted to teach, and also spirituality. So out of those four disciplines grew what we now call the Lay School of Ministry. It's been copied a number of places, all over the United States, actually. So, you know, you people are responsible for this incredible movement that started with a kind of a dream 31 years ago. So with that in mind, this is a reunion. So thank you very much for inviting me. Okay. Many, this someplace I'm picking up something here. Is there another way of doing this? Because it's coming right back into my. Can I get picked up by that mic at all? Yeah, that'd be better, because this is bothersome.
I think this might do the same thing.
Good. So if I talk about this level, you can hear okay? Yeah, that's better. I have to save my sanity, you know. Okay, many years ago. Yeah, great, thank you. Many years ago, I read an article that described one of our church fathers whose name was Tertullian. And Tertullian said, way back in the 3rd century, he said, Christians are not born, they are made. And that struck me as a wonderful, wonderful idea. When I went to graduate school at St. John's, Collegeville, Minnesota, I was then able to really flesh out what that meant, that we're made in a kind of process, aren't we? I mean, we're not just sort of instantly Christian. And so I had a chance there to start my liturgical studies by looking at what were called the rites of Christian initiation. And that graduate experience really has never really stopped, because this whole idea of studying the process by which we become Christian still kind of fuels me today. Now, I'm a liturgiologist. In other words, the way I do theology is through the liturgical, the services, the rites of the church. And so I have studied for many years the various rites of Christian initiation, how people become Christian. Now, if you're going to study liturgy, let's first of all, we better get a definition of liturgy. The word liturgy comes from 2 Greek words. The word latos, the laity, and oros, work. It's liturgy is the work of the people. It's what people do. Now, the word is really interesting because it comes out of Greek city life, civil life in Greek or Athens. The people who were the liturgists way back in Greek city life, these were the civil servants. These were the public servants. These were the people, I'm sure, rode around in sort of bright orange chariots and put out, signs saying, street closed, or, whatever. They were people who did the work of the people. And so when we gather together on a Sunday morning, for example, and we do our liturgy, our people's work, we're doing that on behalf of not only ourselves, but behalf of the whole world. A friend of mine said that the church is the only organization in the world that exists for the purpose of everybody who are not members. Think of that for just a moment. We exist for the purpose of everybody who are not members. That's so contrary to what many of us think. Now, if you're going to study liturgies also has become a noun, because it's a word that stands for the orders of service that we do. Thanks to the ELW, the name of the Sunday service that we do is called the Holy Communion. The Holy Communion. There was a red book that preceded, let's see, the green book and the cranberry book, I have to keep all my colors straight. In which what we did on Sunday morning was called the service. but now, that has been changed, and so the proper name for our, Sunday gathering is the Holy Communion. Huh? Now, you'll remember that back in, what was it, 1975 or 1978, when the, Green Book came out, huh? It was a very, very interesting, book. In that, first of all, the people that were responsible for the Green Book, Lutheran Book of Worship, remember that? Believe it or not, were members of the ALC, the LCA, and here's the big surprise, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Why? Because in those days, there was this wonderful hope and dream that perhaps we would become one. And then the ALC and the LCA, they did a dastardly thing, We began to ordain women, and the whole thing fell apart. But fortunately for us, the copyrights to the book belonged to the ALC, the LCA, and the Missouri Synod. So when the Missouri Synod came out with its book, which it needed to do, it changed the name of its service on Sunday morning to the Divine Service. And but still, it was all copied about the same as our own. Now, if you're going to study liturgies, which I do, and each of you, in a sense, are practitioners of liturgies, there's some basic principles that we have to keep in mind. Now, what I tried to do on the handout that you have is list some of these principles that you need to have in mind. The first is what I call the principle of integrity. What we do in our life of prayer, okay? Our Sunday morning service, for example, which is our life of prayer, it has to be an accurate reflection of what we hold to be true. Everybody have okay with? And in Latin, it goes something like this: Laetos, oros, is a reflection of the lex credendi. The word simply means the law of creed. What you hold to be true needs to become an accurate reflection in our lex orandi. Orandi from the word oramos, prayer. So that what you pray needs to be an accurate reflection of what you hold to be true. In other words, Sunday morning for you, it has to be an honest reflection of our creed. Now, you say to yourself, well, you know, Lutherans would never do a dishonest thing. I mean, it's not in our nature to do that. Everything that we do in our orders of service is an accurate reflection of what we hold to be true. Right? But okay. It's Saturday at 2:00. And at our Savior's Lutheran Church in Menominee, we're going to do something called the Order of Marriage. Okay, so everybody shows up for the wedding, and we pull out a liturgy, which is the Order of Marriage. Now remember, we're going to be an accurate reflection of what we hold to be true. So what we do is what? The first thing that we do is we assemble a bridal party. Is that right? You know, you take a lot of time if you're a bride and groom picking those people that are going to be there that day. So the bride does what? She picks her maid or matron of honor. Honor means what? She needs to find somebody that will attest to her honor. In other words, to put it quite crassly, she needs to find somebody who's going to attest to her virginity. Now, if that were true, I wouldn't have done 660 weddings, but I did. Okay. And the groom has spent a whole bunch of time trying to select somebody who will be his best man, right? The best man has to be the person who he knows to be the best with sword, huh? Because if there's going to be a battle if the bride's father, who organized this whole deal, huh, welches on the deal. So the groom needs to have somebody that can defend his honor, just as the bride needs to have somebody that can defend her honor. So there's the first key people in your bridal party, huh? Now remember, our marriage rite reflects what we hold to be true. So, what do? We come to church that day having received an invitation. We're met at the door by an usher who the first question out of the usher's mind is what? Are you part of the groom's army or are you part of the bride's army? What side of the church do you want to sit on, huh? So immediately we are divided. And so it's kind of interesting sometimes if you look at that. If the bride or the groom is from out of town, the church looks like it's going to tip on its side because you have 6 people sitting on one side and 200 on another. But in any case, that's part of the ritual, huh, of marriage. So down the aisle comes the bride on the arm of her father, huh? Because she's going to be what? Well, this is kind of interesting. She's going to be given away. Well, actually, she doesn't come cheap. She's not just simply given away, huh? The groom has put up a certain number of cows, sheep, ponies, to win her or pay for her honor. So down the aisle comes the bride to be given away by her father, huh? And the groom, he stands there waiting to receive her. Is that how it all kind of works out? Yeah. And he's probably made the payment for his new bride somewhere off on the side. I mean, he's not crass enough to have to pull out of the checkbook and say, okay, here. It doesn't quite work quite that way. So they are then married, huh? And they say vows, right? Now, remember this, the bride walked in as a bride, huh? A woman, huh? And she walks out as a bride. Huh? The groom walked in as a man and walks out as a man. Now, I see an inequity here, don't you? The bride walked in as a woman became a bride, the man walked in as a man and became a man. No, wait. Fortunately, that one's been changed, huh? So that the purpose now is to pronounce them husband and wife, both of which have gone through kind of drastic change. Now, the last part of the whole ritual is kind of interesting because once they have exchanged their vows and they have been pronounced husband and wife, the bride and groom may kiss, huh? And then they walk out the door, and the whole congregation is waiting to greet them outside on the church steps, right? And do what? Throw rice, huh? Throw a whole bunch of rice, which really is to signify, hey, be fruitful and multiply, you guys, We want to see you have a bunch of kids. Now, that sometimes is defeated by the bride or the groom being on birth control and saying, hey, we're going to fool you. We're not going to do that anyhow for a while. But anyhow, that's part of the American ritual of marriage. Is that what Lutherans hold to be true concerning marriage? Come on. We don't give people away. We do not throw rice at them, huh? Hoping that they have a ton of kids. We don't pick people because they're best with sword. We don't pick other people because they can attest to our virginity. What we have is an Americanization of a ritual, isn't that right? Has nothing to do with our theology. Huh? Now, if you think, it's ridiculous what we do sometimes with order of marriage, What do we do with the order for the burial of the dead? I mean, at the cemetery, we say, well, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, huh? And we've just spent something like about $9,000 embalming somebody, hoping that that doesn't take place for a long, long time, huh? In fact, in one sense, cremation is much more honest. You know, if ashes to ashes and dust to dust is truly what the church, pronounces. So this whole point, my whole point about integrity is that we have to examine what we do to make sure that we're doing an honest thing, that it accurately reflects what we as the church hold to be true. The second principle is what I call the principle of similarity. Because something looks the same, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. Now, you're all you know that on the night in which he was betrayed, Jesus took bread and did what? He broke it, and then he did something interesting. He blessed it, huh? Now, my question to you is, well, what's the blessing that he used? I mean, he just makes something up. God is great, God is good, or something like that, or the Superman theme, or whatever it'll, no, he used a very, very old Jewish table grace called the Barakah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, creator of all things. That's most likely what Jesus did. Why? Jesus was Jewish, huh? And he used what normally was a part of his table grace. Now, we have a table grace also on Sunday mornings that we have Holy Communion, and it's called the Great Thanksgiving. It goes something like, the Lord be with you, and lift up your hearts. Let us do what? Let's give thanks. And so the thanksgiving that we use is not the Barakah, but it's our own version of a table grace. So because something looks the same, it doesn't necessarily mean the same. The second or third one is the principle that I call ritual evolution. Liturgies start from usually simplicity, and then they evolve into kind of complexity. You know that. The longer that we do something, things tend to become more and more complicated and tend to become longer, huh? Yeah. I grew up in the Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. And, well, first of all, we didn't have communion very often. You have to be careful, that you don't overuse something. Huh? Yeah. So we had communion, well, in one time, I think 4 times a year or something like that. It was interesting. We had it Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday, huh? Twice in 1 week. Yeah, but the services started out in my youth kind of simple, and gradually became more and more complex. If you look at the Cranberry book, you're going to see communion liturgies that go on for a couple pages. Yeah. Very, very early in the church's history, that little part called the Thanksgiving? The pastor says, let us give thanks to the Lord our God, huh? And you all say, it's right that we ought to do that, huh? Well, the part that followed that was a thanksgiving for all the things that we ought to be thankful for. And if you look at some of the early liturgies, these things went on for pages, huh? Thanksgiving for the earth, the stars, the critters, the nighthawks, Thanksgiving for everything we can possibly imagine. sort of reminded me when I was a little kid, before I was put to sleep by my mother, and she would always say, well, it's time to offer your Thanksgiving and blessings. And I knew that if I went on and on and on, I could stay up. So it was Thanksgiving for who? I would thank God for everybody I could possibly imagine, huh? And people I never even knew. Huh? And even our prayers become more and more complex and longer and longer. Liturgies develop uniformly. We evolve from diversity to uniformity, huh? As we become in contact with people who are somewhat different than ourselves, we begin to adopt their ways as our own. It's not accidental that if you go to a Roman Catholic church or if you go to an Episcopal Anglican church, you're going to feel quite at home. You're going to feel a lot at home because the liturgies, in one sense, are very, very alike. Huh? Yeah. Lastly, the principle of something that I call liturgical formation. No matter what organization you belong to, whether it's the Boy Scouts of America, the Kiwanis, the Eastern Star, I don't know, whatever organization you belong to, there are two very, very important dimensions to that organization. The first, every organization requires what I call anchorage. You gotta be rooted in what that organization stands for. Huh? You got to know what it is that they believe. And so almost every organization that I can think of has some process whereby people who are novices are taught what that organization holds to be true. That principle is called the principle of anchorage and or formation. Huh? The second thing is every organization needs to provide its members with some opportunities at what I call articulation. Some opportunities to explain to other people what it is that you're about. Is that right? Okay. So there's two dimensions. If you're if you belong to the YMCA, you got to know what the YMCA stands for. And second, you probably also ought to be able to explain to somebody who's not a YMCA member what you're doing. The best example that I can think of for that, many years ago, I went to my first Packer game, okay? And the reason I went to my first Packer game because there was a very well-off person in my congregation that had a luxury box at Lambeau. And it was the preseason, and people that have luxury boxes sometimes give those away for the preseason, huh? And as a pastor, I got some tickets to the luxury box. So I went to the luxury box at Lambeau with my wife and a couple of friends, and there were, I think there were 12 seats there. It was true luxury. It really was nice, huh? But joining us that night was this dentist and his wife, who had, before they got to Lambeau, stopped at O'Hara in Chicago, huh? And they picked up two Ukrainian kids who had just come out of an orphanage in Ukraine. Okay, now these kids did not speak a word of English. They had no idea at all of American football. And when they walked into that luxury box, they saw more food sitting on the table than they had probably ever seen in their whole life. But it was very, very interesting that when they got there, pretty soon, it was only a matter of just a couple of downs, huh? When these kids are imitating what everybody else was doing, huh? Now, they didn't know anything about football, but they did know that when everybody jumped up and started shouting and screaming, it seemed to be the thing to do. And so they did, huh? they became instantly kind of anchored, in this thing because they wanted to, here's the word, belong. That's how powerful belonging is. Now, I've often told my students that the best liturgy in the United States, the best ritual, if you want to see great ritual, there's two places you want to go. You want to go to Arlington National Cemetery because the military knows how to do it. And you want to go to an NFL game because the NFL knows how to do it. They do. It's not accidental, that whole thing. It's all programmed very, very carefully to do what? Anchor you in the tradition. Now, I'm pretty sure that those two Ukrainian kids, it was only a matter of time and they learned enough English that they could say to some other people, hey, we had this incredible experience at this crazy place called Lambeau Field. And they became articulate in what they had done. Okay, those are what I call principles of change. Things do not change automatically. The church doesn't get up some Sunday morning and somebody say, hey, why don't we do something different today? It doesn't happen that way. There are factors that cause the church to do things differently. And I listed some of them there for you. There may be more than that, but I listed the ones that I'm familiar with. Now, most of these occurred in my lifetime. I've been ordained, I think, I don't know, something like 56 years or something like that. That's a long time for the church to put up with me, but they did. Okay, number one, in that period of time, in the 1950s, there were two German biblical scholars, Mowinkle, ready for this one? Mowinkle and Garf. And they decided, they didn't decide, they discovered that the scriptures were not literal. They saw that the scriptures had some similarities, but some incredible differences. And they came up with this theory called source criticism. They began to see that that there were differences in the scripture and differences in the story that nobody had ever pointed out before. They saw, for example, in the Exodus story, remember that story? Okay, the people of Israel do what? They're imprisoned and they're enslaved by the Egyptians, and they want to be free. So what do? God sends them a leader whose name is Moses, and Moses has this kind of neat staff that he carries to kind of neat things happen when he uses it. But anyhow, they flee after a whole series of plagues out of Egypt, and they head for some place called the Red Sea. Right? They get to the Red Sea, and Pharaoh isn't just saying, hey, take off, people, we can get out of here. He's pursuing them with chariots and horses and army and all kinds of things. They get to the Red Sea, and what happens? Okay, here's the tricky part, people, I'm guessing that some of you learned it. They get to the water. Moses does his thing with a stick, and what happens to the sea? It parts, there's water on one side and water on the other. Is that right? That the only possibility? No, if you flip the pages a little bit in the book of Exodus, there's another version of that. What happens? Version B is a strong wind comes up and does what? Blows the water to one side, and the people walk through the dry land, Now I'm guessing, I don't know this for true, but when Cecil B. DeMille wrote the script and directed the script for the Ten Commandments, which version did he use? Well, sure. I mean, what's more dramatic? What's more dramatic? And I'm guessing that most of us in this room have been influenced far more by Cecil B. DeMille than we have by an accurate reading of the options that are in the book of Exodus. It's implanted in our mind. But it was Mowinkle and Garfunkel that said, hey, there's two different versions here. How do you account for that? Well, they saw that there were different sources. Some folks over here saw it one way and told that story, huh? And some folks over here told the other story. There probably were more even than that. And so when they put these stories together that were oral tradition and redacted them, edited them, what'd they do? Well, they didn't do what Lutherans would do, have a vote, huh? They said, no, we'll put them both in. And so that's exactly what happened. So change can be affected by scholarship, huh? Okay. Change also is the result of social changes. How many of you are the product somewhere back there of either Scandinavian or German immigrants? Yeah, I know my crowd. Huh? Okay. So so you come to the United States and you set up a church, huh? It's important to do that. Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is if you're Scandinavian, there isn't a language called Scandinavian, huh? You're either Norwegian, you're Danish, you're Finnish, you're Swedish. And so what do? You do your liturgies in your native tongue so people can do it, huh? There is no English of a second language course you can send everybody to. If you're German, well, you can do High German or Low German, huh? You got a couple varieties there. And you can do that, and you can remain isolated. And you can stay isolated till what happens? Olaf over here, he marries Hilda, and now they got a problem, huh? So what do? They change it and become assimilated to each other. They adapt, huh? They adapt. Some of you married, all of you, and none of you, huh? Okay. Is there any reason why Christmas holidays are not traumatic for people when they get married? I mean, I married this woman who is Scandinavian. She is. I was Germanic, and then we got a problem. Christmas Eve, what do? I could not imagine in my wildest dreams that I was living with a woman, sleeping with a woman who was so greedy that she could not wait until Christmas morning to open the gifts. I mean, it just, it blew my mind. I grew up in a liturgy of what do you do? Well, Christmas Eve, you go to church, huh? You come home. Then, well, you go to bed, then you get up in the morning early and get your gifts, huh? So we had to reach some kind of accommodation, huh? And it became traumatic for a while, huh? Yeah, you've been there. Okay. Political changes occur outside of the church and cause the church to have to change. And this is very, very critical for initiation rites and baptism. In the early Christian church, and the date that I'm putting down as definitive is 311 AD. Before 311 AD, what's the status of the church? It is voluntary, but it is outlawed. Is that accurate? It's outlawed. To become Christian, you can choose to do that, but if you do that, you step outside the protection of the state. And then in 311 AD, something extremely important happens. What happens in 311 AD? the Emperor Constantine is converted to Christianity, through something called the Edict of Milan. And upon the conversion of Constantine, what happens to the church? Well, it moves from voluntary Christianity to non-voluntary Christianity under the protection of the state. You see the difference now? So Constantine does what? He has his armies just go through villages along with some religious people and throw water on everybody, and everybody instantly is Christian. There's no need anymore for initiation rites of any kind. You're all in. Huh? Yeah. And that happens. Oh, by the way, he creates something called state church. Some of you who raised your hand a moment ago who admitted to being Scandinavian, huh? Yeah. Your relatives came out of state church. State church, Norway still. State church, Sweden, still. Or did change? Okay. You became Christian by virtue of your nationality, your citizenship. And then you became a part of the church. And the church's role was what? I have a really good friend who died, but was one of the best pastors I've ever known. His name was Mark Olson. Some of you remember Mark. Mark said that the purpose of the church was to do three things: match people, catch people, and dispatch people. And there you have it. And that's the role that many of the churches in Europe still play today. To hatch, match, and dispatch. Okay. But something then went on until, by the way, many of your relatives labored and grew up under something called state church. And any of you Norwegian here? Yeah, a lot of your Norwegian relatives came to the United States because they wanted to avoid state church. And they became what are known as free churchers. What did they want to be free of? They wanted to be free of government control. Augsburg College in Minneapolis was founded by a bunch of people who were Lutheran Free Church. And there's nobody going to tell these people at Augsburg College what to do. Yeah. Okay. So state church existed until you came to the United States, and in the United States, in this state, 1781, something changed. What changed? What happened in 1781? Take you back to American history, huh? The United States Constitution, which said what? There cannot be an established religion. So now you have what? You have voluntary Christianity that is under the protection of the state. Isn't that an interesting sequence? So you go from non-voluntary to outlawed to non-voluntary, protected, to voluntary and protected. And how does that change the sequence? We are the product of what is called American pluralism. In America, you can be what? Anything you want, including checking off the box that says none of the above. Huh? So we no longer have state church, even though we have some roots of state church still around us. Yeah. There were some dramatic changes that happened even in Eau Claire. Somewhere around the year 1939, 1940. At that time, there were some German Lutheran churches in Eau Claire. The biggest one is probably St. John's Lutheran on Highland Avenue, the biggest one. But what happened in 39? It no longer became, chic or vogue or, to speak German. So you got Americanized as fast as you can. And that happened in the congregation that I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the very first thing that they did, of course, was into the sanctuary, they did what? They brought in an American flag. Isn't that interesting? They brought in an American flag, and that said to everybody, hey, we're not German anymore. We're American. And there's a whole section of our hymnal that still sings kind of national hymns. Now, Lutherans, we're kind of strange. We're neat people, though, huh? We like balance. You got to have balance. So we got an American flag on one side of the, chancel. Now, what happened? Well, you got to have something on the other side, right? So you bring in something called the Christian flag. Now, the Christian flag's just an interesting little creation. You remember, it's all symbols. All symbols have to have a story of origin. Is that right? It came from somewhere. And the American flag, well, you know that story. You know about George Washington and Betsy Ross and all that. Whether it's true or not, who cares? But we have a story. How about the American flag? Or the American Christian flag, huh? What's the story of origin there? Nobody knows. Huh? But I do know this, that Augsburg Publishing House made a whole lot of money selling them. Huh? And so we've got this balance now. We got, the American flag on one side and the church flag on the other, and everybody's happy. What we ought to, if we're going to really be honest, here's that honesty thing. We ought to bring in the United Nations flag. Huh? Because that would say something about the globalization of Christianity rather than what we're currently hearing about nationalism, huh? Yeah, but I also know this, that as a pastor, I'm not going to be the one to take the church flag or the American flag out of there. It's not going to happen on my watch. First parish I served was in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, and the name of the parish was Dr. Martin Luther Church. Now, that's pretty Germanic, huh? Okay, we have the American flag on one side, and we have the Christian flag on the other. And so just to be nasty and mean, what I used to do is come in during the week and I'd move them a little bit further apart. Maybe a couple, just a foot, maybe a little bit, a little bit. And then this is interesting. Then there was a critical distance that when I got too far apart, somebody else came in and did what? Slammed them together. Now, I was at Dr. Martin Luther for 2 years, and I played that game for 2 years. Huh? It was kind of fun, just simply to do that, to be nasty. The third or fourth great reason for change is what I call ecumenical dialogue. I was the first Lutheran to receive a graduate degree from St. John's Lutheran Church or Lutheran College in at Collegeville, Minnesota. I was the first Lutheran that got a degree in liturgical studies, which was kind of interesting. They didn't quite know what to do with me, but they're Benedictines, and so they welcomed me. That's all Benedictines. Benedictines can't help but welcome you. They just can't do that. But there in that environment, some of my friends say, you really became too Catholic. So it's kind of interesting. When I went to Luther Seminary to teach, I was Germanic in a Norwegian seminary, so I was too Germanic to be among the Norwegians, and I had graduate degree from a college that was Roman Catholic, So I was too Catholic to be among the Lutherans. It's kind of a strange never land to be in, isn't it? But I began to pick up some things and some very, very important kind of relationships. And I brought many of those into the congregation that I served after I left seminary. Fortunately, I served in an ecumenical Roman Catholic Lutheran setting. University Lutheran, I don't know if you know this, University Lutheran in Eau Claire is interesting for two reasons. Number one, it's one of 4 University Lutheran officially constituted congregations on public university campuses. There's only 4 in the whole ELCA. Northwestern, Michigan, Eau Claire, and Champaign-Urbana. Those are the only 4. But it's also this is the only thing. It's the only Lutheran Roman Catholic owned building in the United States. Isn't that interesting? So if people say Catholics and Lutherans can't get along, I say, hey, we did it since 1973. Doing it well. And in fact, neither of us could afford to survive alone. Carol, you're part of it. Yeah. One of the main things it is a wonderful, wonderful model for university students of how Catholics and Lutherans can agree in harmony. Wonderful. Okay. The other change, and this is an interesting one, what I call anthropological or anthropology change. Something changes in our study of culture. I'm going to spend a moment here before we take a break. There was a Dutch anthropologist whose name was Arnold van Gennep. You got that one? Arnold van Gennep. Arnold van Gennep went to Africa and studied these primitive cultures. But the thing that fascinated Arnold van Gennep was how people in some African cultures became adults or came of age. And the thing that he studied, which was most interesting, there was one tribe that he studied in which young men, boys, their movement from boys to men involved having a high tower, okay? A high tower. And the young man, the candidate, the young man would crawl up that tower. And at the top of the tower, there was an elder there who affixed to this kid's ankles some vines. And the thing was that this young man, in order to move from being a boy to a man, he needed to jump off the tower. Now, at the bottom of the tower is the whole village. They're ready, to meet him. Now, this is before elastic and bungee cords and all of that. The trick was that at the last moment, the vines would hold and he would be snatched up, And Arnold van Gennep studied this and said, what this is a process. It's an interesting process. There is a part where the boy separated himself from his community. He went up into this tower, and there he was separate. And then in jumping off, it was a chaotic moment, a moment of chaos. He didn't belong on the top. He didn't belong on the bottom. He was in between, suspended. And then hopefully the vines worked. And at the bottom, he was welcomed into the adult community. And Van Gennep said, okay, that's a process. There's separation, there's chaos, and then there's incorporation. And the interesting thing is, you know that rhythm extremely well. Van Gennep called it the passage motif. Isn't that interesting? Any of you ever move? Yeah. Okay. the Bureau of Labor Statistics say we move 7 times in an adult lifetime. Some of us are, Phil, you're on somebody else's 7 too. Okay, what do? When you're gonna move, you leave where you used to be, huh? And your neighbors who hopefully like you have a party in your leaving. They call it a bon voyage party, huh? Or something like that. And so you leave the old address and you load everything, or you probably have it loaded, huh? You put everything you own into a Mayflower van. Okay, and it goes to your new address, suspended, huh? It's not old and it's not new. It's sort of on 18 wheels, huh? Going down the highway, and you and your spouse, you're sitting there entertaining all these visions of everything you own in the whole world being spewed on a highway, huh? In the median strip, and everybody's driving by looking at your stuff, saying, "My God, who would ever buy a couch that looked like that?" You know? But so you're suspended. You're not here, you're not there. You move into your new place, and what do? You decorate it like the old place, even though it doesn't work, huh? It doesn't work very well, but you try it, but then you don't belong yet. You don't belong. You don't belong until some neighbor comes over and says, "Hey, I just made some fresh bars and I got some coffee here. Let's welcome," huh? So in eating, you join again. Isn't that interesting how that happens? Then Genup says you got to have food in order to belong. Now, Mayflower Van Line, they knows that very well. When Mayflower Van Line sets up your new house, they do 2 things. They set up your bed first, because they know you're going to be tired. And the second thing they set up is what? Your kitchen table. It's interesting. They got that down pretty well, huh? Van Genup said there's certain passage times in our life. Marriage is a passage. Changing jobs, it's a passage. Divorce, it's a passage. Huh? Death is a passage. This passage motifs. Now, it's interesting in our new ELW rights for occasional services. There's some of these services that are now called passage services. That's how influential Van Genup's work actually is. The last thing, I didn't know what to call it. I call it a polemical, huh? A pandemical. I think what it properly is the pandemical diaspora that we have just come through. Think of the change in your congregation that COVID-19 has made. Nobody got up some Sunday morning and said, "I think we ought to just get rid of a whole bunch of people." No, they left. Huh? And look what happened and is in the process of happening. We still don't know where many of them are. That's the diaspora. Now, that's going to lead into the last thing I want to talk about today, before we all go home. I want to talk about how has this changed the whole notion of belonging. You know, who belongs and who does not. It was at one time in the ELCA, there were 3 categories of membership. There were your baptized members, there were your confirmed members, and there were communicant members. And that's the numbers that you had to report to the national church every year. Baptized, communicant, and confirmed. Does that still work? Okay, break time, people. How long do you need?
Well, 10 minutes.
Huh? All right, good. And then we'll get back and we'll dive into Holy Baptist.